There's been some interest in creating an enemy spawner in the Michael Games community, so I just want to show my implementation that I've done of this. So right here we have just a time spawner. So every X number of seconds, if there is no goblin here, it'll spawn a new one. So we wait, it'll die. I believe I have it set for 5 seconds or something like that. There he comes. We also have this manual spawner, so if I hit the interact, we'll just keep spawning a whole bunch of goblins here. Just clean these guys all up here. And then we have the last thing I have here is a wave spawner. So if we step on this, we'll trigger off the wave of slimes. You'll see here they spawn in a bunch of different spots. And there's 3 in the first wave, and then there'll be 5 that spawn in the second wave. And there they are. So again, that's a nice implementation I have. It's manually spawn, time spawner, and then a wave spawner. The wave spawner only works one time, and then after it spawns everything, it no longer works. But let's jump on over. I'll take a look through the code. So right now when we build one of these scenes, the enemy spawner just has some key stuff over here. And so we can enable it or disable it. We choose what type it is, if it's a timer, a trigger, or manual. We use the enemy array. We can set up, right now I just have a goblin load into this array, but you can add multiple types of enemies in here. You have spawn point markers. Right now this one just spawns where it is, but if we look at the wave spawn over here, I have 3 separate marker 3Ds, and we just add those into the, where is it here? Whoops, there it is. We just add it into the spawn markers, and then it'll randomly select one of these spawn points to spawn the enemy. You could scatter these all around. I just kind of put those here for the demo. We have for our timer ones, you can have, how long. This is 2 seconds. It spawns up to 5 enemies at a time, and then if after 5 enemies, it won't spawn anymore. So let's go look at this one over here. Our first one here is the timer. We'll take a look at that. We have a spawn timer, so every 3 seconds it spawns up to 1 enemy. If we change this up, this is the maximum number of enemies that can be on screen that are spawned from the spawner at a time. Right now for testing, I just have it set for 1, and this is how often it checks to see if there's a goblin there. So it's not like the goblin dies, 3 seconds later a new one is spawned. It's every 3 seconds it's checking to see. You can do a little bit more tweaking of the code so the timer doesn't start until it's no longer at the spawn limit, but that's not how I have it coded right now. The other thing I've done is my manual switch, I just have it tied back into the same spawner. And so on the, where is it here? It's just going to spawn the associated enemy, which in this case is a goblin. And then last, let's look at the wave spawner here. This is, you walk into the trigger area. When you set up the enemy spawner here, you set it up, of course, for the trigger mode. You set it up for what enemies are in there. In this case, I did slimes. You can set up the spawn points. I have the 3 marker 2Ds here. You can do a bunch of different ones. And here we come into our wave array, and then in our, how many waves out there? In this case, so there's 2. So then in the first one, there's going to be 3 slimes that spawn in 1 second apart. And then in the next wave, it's going to be 5 slimes, and they all spawn 0.7 seconds apart. And then if you want to add a 3rd wave, you can do such a thing, just add in another dictionary, and then increase the count in the interval. So the code, real nice and easy. We have an enum, so then you can select between timer, trigger, and manual. We got all of our export vars that are important. You can have the timer spawn at multiple places if you want to use marker 3Ds. The enemies that you want to spawn in, you can spawn in more than one type of enemy. It'll randomly pick between them all. And then we have our timer set up here, exports, and our example of the waves and things like that. Right now, when you come into this, you can set up how long there is between the waves. It can get a little confusing if you're not paying attention, because if you come in here and you look at the Right here you have time between waves, but if you look at the waves itself and you see interval is 1, that's 1 second between when each of the things spawn, and then the time between the waves is 3 seconds, and it won't spawn the next wave until everything from the previous wave has been spawned, and then this timer has been hit. So the enemy spawner node is pretty simple. It's just the enemy spawner, and I have a timer sub node here so that we can use that for doing. You could also use a tree timer if you like. I prefer this. It makes things a little bit easier for me. Then on the ready, if we don't have it enabled, just go ahead and return. Don't run the enemy spawner. Simple match statement here. If it's a timer type, go to the start timer function. If it's a trigger, connect the trigger node. So wherever the trigger plate's going to be, the area 2D that's going to trigger that. So we come down here, let's just take a real quick look at the start timer. We set up the wait. We set up the timeout so that whenever that timer expires, and then we start the timer. So then when it times out, we just come down here. It says check the spawn limit. If it's less than the spawn limit, spawn an enemy. And this is pretty simple, straightforward. If enemies is empty, return, aka you didn't put anything in there. And if not, grab the enemy scene. If there's multiple enemy scenes, pick a random one and instantiate it, and then put it in here. This checks to see if you have any marker 2Ds. If you don't have any, it's just going to use whatever the global position of the spawner is. If you do have it, we'll go through, we'll pick a random one of those, and then we will assign the marker's global position to the enemy global position, and then we add it to the parent. So this right here is a very key line you want to make sure you have, because if you don't attach it to the parent, which in this case, if you come back here and we look at our spawner test, here's the enemy spawner, but we want to attach it so it actually runs in the 2D scene. What I found here through much hair pulling was if I just add it here and I do the global position here, the enemy global position, it would put the enemy based off the global position off the enemy spawner position. So they would spawn relative to the enemy spawner, not relative to your scene. So you want to make sure we're adding the enemy to the parent, not to the enemy spawner itself. And then here's our active enemies array. You can do a whole bunch of things with this if you want to do some additional checking. Right now, all I'm using it for is comparing it to the spawn count, and then we spawn it. So we go back here, area triggered. Guess what? Players in there, start our wave spawning. There's one other thing right here, the spawn now. This is our manual thing. So like I have the area 2D set up, is every time you interact, it spawns an enemy. Useful if you want something to trigger an event or something along those lines, or I don't know, you're doing some test combat arena and every time you hit a button, it can spawn an enemy. There's a couple different use cases for that, but that's nice and easy to use. So when the body enters the area 2D, you can go ahead and trigger this. Right now, the way that Michael's doing it, where he's basing it off class names, so player is of type player class, then go ahead and do this. I've started in my other games, started using actual groups, and so if it's in the group player, then I can use that line instead of checking to see if it's of player class. And then after that, we start the wave spawning. We come down here. We check to see if it's the current wave is beyond how many waves are in our count. If it is, don't spawn anything. We get our current wave, all the enemies and everything that's in it. We keep track of how many enemies have spawned. We go through the wait time for the interval. I do this for error checking, saying, hey, if the timer is not connected, then connect it. This just keeps everything clean. Most of the time you'll see just this line. I like to add that in just to make sure that my code, I don't get any of the yellow alarms in my stuff. Ignore the red one right now. And then we start the timer. And then when the timer times out, we do the wave spawn. We just said, hey, if enemy spawn is less than the current number of enemies in the wave, spawn an enemy, add the count to the enemy spawn. So once that wave's done, then we stop the timer and we disconnect it. And then we increase the number of the wave. And then we just check to see if we're at the end. If we still have more waves to do, we wait for the timeout between the waves, and then we start the whole wave spawning process all over for the next wave. So that's my enemy spawner script. It's easily adaptable to multiple genres. I'm using it in my 2D side scroller. I've used it in the AARPG. I'm also using it in my RTS Game Jam game that I'm working on right now for Terminus Squad. It's very versatile. You can use it in multiple games. I'm going to share the repo down below. If you want to copy the code, feel free. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message either on Discord or a comment here on YouTube. Thanks. Bye.